Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. India and Pakistan are both celebrating the 50th anniversary of the 1965 war in the months of August and September. And as we look back at this conflict, which set out a message to Pakistan that any attack on Kashmir would lead to a severe Indian response right across the Indo-Pak border, it is time to seriously reflect on who got it right.
With Pakistan having failed to wrest Kashmir from India following its invasion of 1947, and with India having received a drubbing by the Chinese in 1962, there was a strong lobby in Pakistan for a better planned invasion of Kashmir, while India was still perceived to be militarily weak. Pakistan first made probing attacks in the Run of Kutch in April 1965 to test India's resolve, and then thereafter launched a two-part offensive. The first operation, launched in August 1965, codenamed Operation Gibraltar, was the infiltration of thousands of Pakistani soldiers across the ceasefire line who were to create an uprising in the valley with attacks and sabotage. And then Pakistan had planned to seize Kashmir after a short, swift war by an air and land offensive near Jammu under Operation Grand Slam. But India responded with a major tank and air counter-offensive that took Pakistan's military dictator and President Ayub Khan completely by surprise, as he moved his forces from Chamb near Jammu in panic to prevent the fall of Lahore and Sialkot, abandoning his plans to take over Kashmir. What followed was the largest tank battle since World War II in the plains of Punjab inside Pakistani territory, which had a big impact on Pakistan's psyche as their superior tanks and fighter jets were given a resounding reply by India's forces. Ayub Khan managed to, however, prevent the fall of Lahore, and on the basis of this, Pakistan now claims that the 1965 war was a victory for them. The truth is that America and Russia forced India to accept a ceasefire. On September 22nd, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution that called for an unconditional ceasefire from both nations, and the war ended the next day. The Soviet Union, led by Premier Alexei Kosygin, brokered a ceasefire in Tashkent, on the basis of which India was made to give up its gains in Punjab and return the Haji Pir Pass. In a cruel twist of fate, India's Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri died of a heart attack the following day while still in Tashkent.
And to look at the 1965 war in greater depth, we have two experts who've both studied the subject, and one of them has been a key player in those days in Pakistan. Ambassador Bajpai was earlier posted in Pakistan in between 62 and 65 and was subsequently our ambassador in Pakistan in the 70s, and thereafter on retirement has been the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board and is now with the Delhi Policy Group. And we have General Dhruv Katoch, who was earlier the head of the Center for Land Warfare Studies, currently is the editor of the monthly Salute, as well as is the author of a book to soon be released on the 1965 war. Ambassador Bajpai, sir, how is it that India was taken completely by surprise by Pakistan's initiatives, and the records show that when our ambassador then in August went to present his credentials to Pakistan, Pakistan was in a deep hurry to get it done with so that they could then launch Operation Gibraltar, which was part one of 1965, as you know.
As far as Pakistan's hurry is concerned, actually signals had been emanating ever since the Run of Kutch. Mr. Bhutto was known to be talking quite openly about creating an Algeria-type situation, and Operation Gibraltar was the outcome of those kinds of thinking. The fact of the matter is that we don't always pay attention to things, but apart from that, the real truth of the matter is that our information was very limited. Our intelligence with full respect to all our agencies, should have warned us. As you know, we did not realize what was happening in the run of Kutch. That was because although we claimed the territory, we did not patrol it as we were supposed to, and Pakistan took advantage of our customary sloppiness to occupy many of the points that we had. The result was, of course, a limited conflict which ended, like most of these things do, in a draw with an international tribunal which always tries to be even-handed.
Parts of Kutch to them.
But that's a separate story. As far as the effect on further action was concerned, it had two. On the one hand, Pakistan became even more convinced than it already was after 62, that India is a flabby giant, it can't look after its affairs, it is ripe for attack. But what it failed to realize was that thanks to this dress rehearsal, it worked against them, because we had already, in preparation for real conflict in the case of the run of Kutch, had moved the army forward into forward positions, so that when the Kashmir operation started, we were able to save a lot of valuable time by being in the forward positions.
General sir, I want to ask you that large amount of infiltrators got past the ceasefire line. Figures range between 5,000 and 33,000 between 5th of August and sometime end of August, early September, as part of Operation Gibraltar, which was really initiated by Pakistan to create an Algeria-like uprising in Kashmir, assuming that Kashmir was ready for the grabs as far as Pakistan was concerned. How could such a large number of infiltrations take place on the ceasefire line then? Was it thinly manned compared to what it is now, fence or no fence? Or is it just that the Indian Army was waiting to be called into action, and until then it was left to somebody else to sort of sound the alarm bells that these guys had gotten, which eventually did, because the Kashmiri locals helped the police capture many of these Pakistanis, and the plan began to get out of Pakistan's control, which eventually led to Operation Grand Slam.
When we are looking at Operation Gibraltar and Grand Slam, the planning had taken place much earlier. It actually started in 1964 with President Ayub Khan at that time creating something called the Kashmir Publicity Committee. And it was in February of 65 that this committee presented a plan to Ayub about Operation Gibraltar, the way it actually unfolded. And at that time, the president said no. He didn't want a war with India. I think it was after the Kutch operations, as the ambassador has just mentioned, I think he changed his mind. He thought he could get away with it. And that was the time when the orders were given to the GOC 12 Division to go ahead with the plan. And this plan consisted of two elements. The first element was Gibraltar, where they infiltrated a total of 9 columns. The figures are generally more in the range of 6,000 to 8,000. That will be a more accurate range. 6,000 to 8,000. There were 6 columns named after Muslim invaders. Then there were 3 more columns, a total of 9 columns which came in. On the 1st of August itself, the army chief was supposed to visit the division. Now, he didn't come that day. So the division, the officers were already ready. The GOC was there. The G1 Ops, what we call the Colonel GS now, he was there. And none of it was discussed. So from there, the GOC went. He had to go for to the Amarnath. He was going to Amarnath for a yatra. He pushed off there. The G1's posting had come. He moved off to the forward areas to pay his farewell visits. And the Div headquarters, when all this infiltration was taking place on the 1st of August, when it started, there was nobody really in the Div headquarters except for the G2.
I mean, as the point
we were
the
taken by
ambassador
surprise.
made, that somewhere there was a failure of assessment and intelligence. I'll go back to the ambassador, sir. What was the mood in Pakistan outside the military and the foreign office circles? Was everybody in Pakistan chest thumping and ready to kind of roll into India, or was it just a handful of people who were planning this operation and suddenly wanted to give Kashmir on a platter to the Pakistanis?
Well, it's all these things are generally done by a handful of people. As far as the atmosphere in Pakistan was concerned, yes, the certain disdain of India, which was always there, had heightened after the 62 humiliation. And therefore, they did feel that we were weak And also they always had a certain hubris about themselves. The story goes that when Musa, who was hesitant about the operations, thinking that India is much bigger despite its weaknesses, Bhutto and Aziz Ahmad, who were the chief advocates of these operations, said to him, "Oh, Musa, why are you worried? You know that one Pakistani can beat 10 Indians." That kind of atmosphere, to which Musa is supposed to have replied, "Yes, but what do I do when the 11th appears?" That was the kind of hesitation. What overcame it in Ayub's case, apart from the weaknesses that were shown at our handling of other operations, was finally the American decision to withdraw aid, which enabled the Hawks to argue with him that we have an advantage of weaponry at the moment. With India's build-up in few years, it may not happen. This is the time to strike. And it was the July decision of President Johnson not to renew the Air Force supplies that finally triggered that, Ayub.
Interesting. We'll be back after a break to look more specifically at one or two of the major military operations and how that put pressure on Pakistan to accept a ceasefire.